Hello, this is Veronica Ramirez, and this is my American Like Me presentation. The author, Diane Guerrero, is an American actress and author from Boston, Massachusetts. She was born in 1986, and she is best known for her roles in series like Orange is the New Black and Jane the Virgin. The main argument of this text is seeing yourself represented on screen and in modern media is important and can influence people's perceptions of themselves. This argument is constructed using compare and contrast approach, descriptive anecdotes that lead into a pathos appeal, and towards the end uses a reflective tone to wrap up all the significant analogies made previously and give the chapter a full circle feel. The purpose. Guerrero explains why accurate representation, specifically of minority groups that humanize and show such peoples as the main characters in their own stories, is such an empowering thing. She goes on to encourage her reader to imagine a world where this is not only a thing, but a common one at that, and how wonderful that could be. Her audience is anyone who has ever looked on screen and wondered why no one looks like them. Speaker. Guerrero is the daughter of two Colombian immigrant parents, a Latina woman, and grew up watching and admiring people who, though she could relate to in their eccentricity and energy, she could not see her culture reflected back at her when she watched them. Situation. Diane describes her life, beginning when she was a child, loving characters who, despite looking nothing like her, were just as confident and adventure-loving as she was, to where she is now as an adult, and the work she does to create and educate on the importance of multidimensional representation in such a way that would make both her community and younger her proud. Section 1, paragraphs 1 through 7. In the beginning of the essay, the author provides a description of a doll that was gifted to her, an American doll, a white doll, by her father when she was a child. And this description is then contrasted later on in the third paragraph, with a description of the author. And this is then followed up with contrastment in wealth, in looks, and in culture. This contrasting the author with the doll is symbolic of the American dream, who is symbolic of the American dream, or just being American, shows exactly how the author would at times feel like she wasn't really American enough, despite being born in the United States. Another icon that is mentioned and contrasted against the author is Marilyn Monroe. Later on in the fourth paragraph, family history is given, which is then juxtaposed to the American dream that was described earlier through descriptive diction. And in the final sentence of the fourth paragraph, a paradoxical statement is used, commenting on the irony that this doll that was her idol, who she wanted to be just like, versus her parents who were the ones who worked so hard to get her this doll, to be able to afford this doll, is something that is a sentence where you can truly feel a kind of guilty tone that the author has in that moment. In the next paragraphs, the author then compares herself to other American characters that she'd see on TV, specifically Ariel and Belle, and how she'd relate to them due to their dreams, their passions, their long flowing locks, and their need to share their feelings in song. This is followed up with contrastment once again, and open quotation marks, the only difference was that the fact that I dreamed those dreams from my urban concrete stoop instead of a charming French village. There's a description given of scenarios and situations and things that were such a quintessential part of her growing up and her childhood that she never really saw on screen. She never really saw that representation. This is followed up once more with a compare strategy in the final paragraph, where she again wants to emulate different American icons like Kelly Kapowski from Saved by the Bell, Nick at Night, and what's it called? The Mary Tyler Moore Show, where Mary was described as smart. She broke the mold, all while looking amazing. The author pictured herself as her one day, feeling as happy as she did. In this section, the strategy is compare and contrast. There are pathos appeals, and the overall effect is that Guerrero describes her childhood and her admiration for these pop culture figures to demonstrate the influence of such figures and the comfort and emotional attachment that people can give to them. Appeals included are descriptive diction and allusions. Descriptive dictions used to both visually contrast and internally compare the author and her role models. Allusions to many pop culture figures that have heavy influence and are well known. The frequency of these references to demonstrate go to show just how much these figures permeated through the author's development. Section 2, paragraphs 8 through 12. In the first section, the author states, "I was American and identified more with the American story." This begins to illustrate that caught in the middle feeling that the author experienced when, on the outside, she's more American. On the inside, I'm sorry, she's more American, but on the outside, by blood, she's pure Colombian. In the second paragraph, the author speaks on how from great American musicals and American jazz singers, these were people she, open quotation marks, wanted to embody. They were full of sorrow and yearning and loneliness, but they were still devastatingly beautiful and badass. They had something to tell me about pain, strength, and me, and I was all ears. Once more, she is making allusions to popular American icons, this time from jazz and musical plays. She relates to them in their passion, quote unquote, pain and strength, and emotion, and goes to show that lasting influence that she can still recall all these years later. In this next paragraph, the author begins to describe having seen the movie Real Women Have Curves, which included Latino representation, and she begins to describe how big of a deal it was to her to see someone who could encompass both the inside of how she felt, but at the same time look like her on the outside as well, who came from a similar background like hers, and who she could identify with body and soul. This is followed up with both pathos, ethos appeals, and context is given of really why it impacted her so much, especially because September 11th had just occurred and xenophobia was really running rampant in those moments. This only made it feel that much more significant to her. In the next paragraph, she goes on to describe another instance where she felt so seen by another Latino character on screen, and she describes not wanting to give up the fact that she knew he was Colombian, and the Puerto Rican kids who try to claim him, she and her friend, who was presumably also Colombian, she states, "Grizzle and I just couldn't let them have this, not this. We knew the truth. He was ours." The author felt so seen and refused to give up even a sliver of similarity between her and the character on screen that made her just that tiny bit closer to him. This wasn't something she was really willing to give up. In this final section, the author continues a slow and gradual realization that because she is who she is, because she's Latin, her life and her role, her dreams of becoming an actress, roles really aren't as plentiful as she'd like, and her life might not be what she would have wanted. This is representative of the slow lifting of the naivety of childhood and into the reality of adulthood. The overview of this section, strategy, personal anecdotes, and chronological order are used. Effect demonstrates just how liberating and fabulous and awe-inspiring it made her feel to see people who were capable of holding up a mirror to her when she watched them in movies and roles that humanized them rather than exoticized them, to show how good proper representation can affect people. Appeals and devices used, diction, which used emotion-provoking words throughout to show exactly how she was feeling in that moment. Italics were used when when saying the words main character, and this emphasized just how significant it was to see that Latino women in Real Women Have Curves were not just in supporting roles, but were actually the ones front and center. Section 3, paragraphs 13 through 16. The author begins to state that while representation in the media has gotten better nowadays, it still has a lot of work to be done. She is excited to play kinds of characters that she describes as conscious women, as the kinds of women that her community needs to see. Characters that tell stories from diverse perspectives. In the boxed sections, these two paragraphs really really capture the essence of her purpose in this essay and what the message that she's trying to convey to her readers. And in going back to the third paragraph, she states that she's I'm sorry, in the fourth paragraph, in the fourth paragraph, she is picturing herself as a little girl and is determined to give others what she craved when she was a little girl, to see part of herself represented on screen. Yeah. An overview of this section, the strategies used were a reflective one, finalizing thoughts that had been begun in the first parts of the essay and giving it a sense of closure. Pathos appeals were used. Descriptions are used to bring the audience into her shoes and view the situation through her eyes. The effects establish the reason why it is so important to push in this narrative of diverse and inclusive stories. Finally, the appeals and devices used were descriptive diction, uses small descriptive sentences that invoke feeling in the audience and specifically help them feel the way that she felt in this situation as a result support her conclusion and her determination in bringing more representation to the media. Thank you.